going to start talking about breakfast. We're going to do another breakfast for dinner show. Hope you all don't mind, but it's going to be a good one. I know I always say that, but this one is going to really, it's going to be a good one. I don't know how to put it any other way, right? We'll just call it a very special episode, okay? Say it in a very serious voice. All right. Okay. So who am I? My name is Dave Nelson, and I am here with Industry Cooking. Okay. I am covering basic techniques every Monday at 4 p.m. and you can join me every single time. I'm kind of laying down culinary school. I'm a ex-culinary instructor, and I'm kind of laying down all my old lectures from back in the day. Okay. And today, as I said, we're talking about breakfast cookery. When we're talking about breakfast cookery, there's really a lot of technique behind it, okay? You think about everything that goes behind eggs, right? There's a lot to know. Think about all of the meat cookery, like ham and bacon and stuff. If you're making your own stuff, hey, there's a lot to know there, right? And how to execute, how to make nice crispy bacon every single time. That's a trick, right? There's baking involved in custards, like French toast and bread puddings and things like that. That's all involved in breakfast cookery. There are potatoes, right? Tons and tons of different potato dishes, lots of stuff that you can kind of wrap your brain around when you're talking about breakfast cookery. Gosh, if you want to talk about really good breakfast food, you might as well just throw in a bunch of Mexican ingredients in there too, right? You know, your beans and your rice, you know, being able to make a good batch of that, and you know, just things like eggs and cheese, maybe a little ranchero sauce, something on the side. Just with a few ingredients, you can just have a monster of a menu. I always kind of wondered about a breakfast restaurant where you could just walk in and treat it like a deli. You know how you can go to a deli and you can tell them, hey, I want a sandwich on this bread, I want this kind of spread on it, I want this kind of meat, I want this kind of cheese, this kind of veggies on there. All of that stuff comes together, and you can just order it any way you want. And it seemed to me breakfast is like that too. It seems that any breakfast restaurant should be able to serve you as if it were a deli, and you could walk in and say, yeah, I want, let's see, over easy egg, I want some rice and beans along with that, a little ranchero sauce, throw some cheese on top, and boom, you got huevos rancheros or something. Or maybe you want a little side of French toast to go along with it, and a waffle too, right? Fried chicken and waffles. And you know, you don't have to go too in depth, but you guys see what I mean. It's like a deli. Any breakfast restaurant can make almost any breakfast with what they have just lying around, right? This is a perfect example of what it is that I'm trying to do. Talk about different techniques that you can vary any way that you want. Today I'm kind of doing the Bennie episode, and we're going to be talking about that. But first, I wanted to talk about our sponsor. Okay, every week we got a special corporate sponsor, and it is still the wonderful VMillerMeats. They're out there at 48th and Folsom in Sacramento. They are doing natural meats. They are doing everything in-house. There's nothing that comes in outside that's not something that they are fabricating and making right there. They're doing all natural meats from Stemple Creek. Their beef and lamb comes from Stemple Creek. Their pork comes from Llano Seco. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff, and it's a memorable dining experience. You do need to go in and check it out. It truly is a world of meat imagination. Okay, so get on in there. I should mention, you go into VMillerMeats and ask about and mention Industry Cooking, the show that you're watching right now, okay, for 15% off of any fine purchases that you might make there. Okay, so like I said, walk in to VMillerMeats, ask them about Industry Cooking, and you get 15% off of your purchases at VMillerMeats. These guys are new school butchers. They're kicking it old school, okay? And so next, let's get into Bennie. I was kind of talking about breakfast, right? And what I love with Bennie's is when I see a restaurant that has like almost a Bennie bar. They got about 6 or 8 or 9 different types of Bennies on there, where you can mix and match different sauces and different bases and things like that. You think about Bennie, there is the classic Benedict, okay? And we're talking about eggs Benedict. I keep saying the word Bennie, but we're really talking about eggs Benedict. And when you're talking about eggs Benedict, we're usually seeing a base on there, right? And then we are seeing a poached egg, we're seeing a sauce on there, and then we are typically going to see some kind of a garnish on on there. So in the case of Eggs Benedict, your base is like typically an English muffin or a crusted with all the nooks and crannies and whatnot, right? Your garnish on this thing is going to be a slice of Canadian bacon, okay? And also a traditional Eggs Benedict will have a slice of truffle on top. Sometimes you'll see them put a little slice of black olive on there just to kind of fake it, okay? But that's typically what you will see. You are going to see a Hollandaise sauce on there, and we are going to be getting in depth on the Hollandaise sauce today. We're going to be talking about that. And then finally, you've got your poached egg, if I didn't mention it, right? You've got the poached egg, which is kind of common to any Bennie, right? But if you think about all those elements, the base basically, the egg itself, the sauce, the garnish, there's a lot of ways you can mix up Eggs Benedict and kind of get a lot of variety out of that, right? So if you think about the base, it's not just about an English muffin, right? You could put like garlic bread down there, a beautiful French baguette, maybe grill it off, get a little of that smoky flavor going, or the base could be a piece of polenta. The base could be a grilled vegetable, eggplant, a grilled tomato, or something along those lines, right? An artichoke heart or something, right? The base can be a lot of things, and it doesn't even have to be solid. I think of I've done like a sort of a Bennie with a soft polenta with a red tomato sauce over the top. That's beautiful. And since I mentioned sauce, let's talk about different sauces, right? You can do variations on the sauces. The traditional Eggs Benedict, like I said, had Hollandaise. It's a lemon and butter sauce. It's an emulsion type sauce. We'll get into that, right? But you can do an Eggs Benedict style thing. They have all of these different names, right? But you can do an Eggs Benedict that has a tomato sauce on it. I mentioned it a little while ago. Eggs and like Italian tomato sauce go really, really well together, right? Or like a creamy tomato sauce. You could go kind of creamy. You could do an Eggs Benedict that has like country gravy over the top of it. There's another sauce that you see on a lot of egg dishes called Mornay. It's basically, it's like a country gravy. It's a milk-based sauce, and it's going to have like a cheese melted into it, usually a Gruyere cheese or something like that, right? So you can just go on and on with these sauces. Pesto cream on top of your eggs, a mushroom sauce, like a creamy demi sauce, right? You know, a meaty kind of a thing. Bolognese sauce, right? Italian meat sauce. You can just go on and on with different sauces for Bennie type variations, right? Let's see, other things, the garnishes on there. I mentioned Canadian bacon is kind of the garnish on Eggs Benedict, but you can also, you can imagine, you know, the different types of garnishes. I mentioned mushrooms a minute ago, right? Different types of meats. I'm not going to do Canadian bacon, quite frankly. I'm not a big ham guy, and Canadian bacon is kind of hammy to me, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of work with some bacon today because I prefer that, and it's something I already have around. So I just have some bacon already cooked off. We're really not talking much about that today. But you can imagine your garnishes can just go on and on and on. Grilled vegetables, you know, a slice of tofu under your egg, whatever you want it to be, right? And the last thing is that beautiful poached egg and getting that right every single time, and I kind of want to talk about that. Now, there's a certain thing that we talk about in culinary school. It's a certain temperature range and everything. I'm going to talk about the culinary school thing, and then I'm also going to talk about, hey, I was a breakfast guy for a while, and if I want these things to really work and I need to crank them out, okay, this is kind of how I make that happen, okay? So that's what we'll get into a little bit. We'll talk about that beautiful poached egg. The first thing I'm going to talk about, we're going to talk about our Hollandaise, okay? So getting into the Hollandaise, I teach a really, really basic Hollandaise. Working out in breakfast houses, almost every single line cook I knew had a different take on their Hollandaise, and I'm going to kind of talk about the different elements where they were doing little variations and stuff. I like to teach a very, very basic Hollandaise, and then everything else is variation on that, right? I was talking about, I really don't use a lot of ingredients. Now, I've got 7 ingredients in this, but one of them is salt and pepper, basically, so I'm not even counting that, and water is actually one of them too, right? So really, this is like a 4 or 5 ingredient Hollandaise if you want to kind of look at it that way. First thing is clarified butter, and I will be honest, I tend to just use whole butter for my Hollandaise, but I want to talk about clarified butter because this is usually where we talk about that. So I'm going to talk about using a clarified butter. It's a classical thing, but whole butter will work. We're going to touch on that, okay? Another thing that we're going to need in this Hollandaise is we're going to start out with a little bit of water and some peppercorn. You're going to see me cook those 2 things together to make what we call a reduction, okay? And then we're going to have a little cayenne pepper in there, a little bit of egg yolk. I'm going to do a 2 yolk Hollandaise today. We're going to kind of talk about that. And then I'm going to finish with a little bit of lemon and salt. let's kind of talk about these things, these three elements, okay? The reduction is basically a liquid, and what we're doing here with this hollandaise, it's what we call an emulsion sauce, okay? This is a hot emulsion sauce. I've done cold emulsion sauces before. Some of you may have seen the fabulous Egg Salad Soirée, where I made a mayonnaise from scratch, from start to finish, right? And so that was an example of a cold emulsion. This hollandaise is a hot emulsion, and what we're going to be doing, the difference between a cold and a hot, besides temperature, of course, right, is that cold emulsion, that mayonnaise and aiolis, things like that, are very, very solid. There's not much air in them, right? They're very thick and solid, right? Whereas when I apply heat, I'm able to kind of get the eggs in the mixture to kind of capture air, and I can get much more loft out of this, right? I can get that foaminess. I was just talking to someone else about loft a second ago on social media, right? I want that foaminess here, and so when I apply heat to it, that makes my hot emulsion sauces much more frothy and foamy, okay? If you've ever had a zablayon, that's an example of what we might see here when you're heating these eggs over a water bath or something, right? And so the first stage of this, as we put this thing together, I should say, let me back up, as we put this together, we're combining a liquid here, and the liquid is going to be kind of a flavored reduction that I make on the stove, okay? We're just going to call it the reduction, okay? And this is a place where many chefs go in different directions here. So the reduction is a liquid. It's water-based, okay? Sometimes it has some acid in it or something, but water is important here. The next part is the butter, okay? This is a lipid or a fat, right? And everybody knows fats and water, they don't mix. Oil and water don't mix. Butter and water don't mix, right? And so what we're going to do is add a third component, a egg yolk here. And when we add that egg yolk is going to bring those two elements together. It's got a little element in there called lecithin. It's going to help these two elements combine into a beautiful smooth sauce that doesn't separate out kind of like a vinaigrette, okay? So I want to talk about those three things there: the reduction, the liquid that goes inside, the butter, the fat that goes inside, and then the yolk that brings the two together, okay? So that's what we're rolling into next, okay? So as far as the reduction goes, I'm gonna go ahead and start. When I mentioned a minute ago, mine's gonna be super simple. I tend to do water and peppercorns, and that's it. But over the years, I have seen chefs throw in wine. I've seen chefs use vinegar. I've seen chefs use a combination of wine and vinegar. I've seen wine, vinegar, water. It just goes on and on. I've seen lemon juice in the reduction. I've seen peppercorns. I've seen thyme sprigs. I've seen bay leaf in there. In culinary school, we really tried to strip it down to the nuts and bolts, and so I'm doing a very simple reduction here of peppercorns and water. This is going to give you that idea that you can infuse flavor into a liquid. Now, how much water am I doing? We're going to kind of talk about this as we go, but I'm going to do a 2 yolk hollandaise here, and that means I'm going to start with 2 ounces of liquid here, okay? An ounce for each one. And then we're going to cook this down and reduce the volume by half on the stove. Water evaporates, the volume reduces, and I'm going to reduce it by half, and that's going to leave me 1 ounce. So I start with 2 ounces, I reduce it down to 1 ounce, and that's what you're going to see me do right here, okay? You can see the pot right there, and I got a little pepper grinder, and I'm just going to throw some peppercorns in there. I have this little blend of peppercorns here that I got from somebody that I'm trying to use up, but mostly I would just use black peppercorns, okay? And next, I want about 2 ounces of water. I'm just going to eyeball this. You'll never see me measure very much. I'm just going to get it from my sink. And that's all it is, okay? Peppercorn and water. I'm going to throw that on my stove over here, my very crowded stove. I got a lot of business going on today. And I'm just going to kick on the heat. And again, if you didn't hear me before, I'm going to cook that down by half, 2 ounces down into 1 ounce, okay? That's going to give me my reduction. And as I said, hey, chefs will do other liquids and other flavors in here. For my hollandaise, I keep it super simple, okay? So that's kind of the reduction. The next thing I want to kind of talk about is the clarified butter part of this, okay? Now, as I said, you can use whole butter here, but I kind of wanted to talk about clarified butter because there are a few little techniques involved in this, okay? So first of all, what is clarified butter? Clarified butter is basically just the butter fat portion of butter, okay? Let me kind of put it this way, okay? I've got some butter here, and I've got it in a little cylindrical container that we call a bain-marie, okay? You can probably see on top there that there's a little bit of chud floating around on top. It's a little funk, okay? And underneath that funk is a bunch of melted butter. And then underneath that melted butter is another layer down there, and it's the whey, W-H-E-Y, and that basically is water. It kind of looks like skim milk, okay? It's very watery, and I don't want the whey in my clarified butter, and I don't want the milk solids on top. I just want everything else in between, okay? The golden fat in between, all right? So to get this out, I want to do a little bit of ladle work. Let me point out that my stove over here just kind of came up a little bit. I'm going to turn that heat down because that's an awful small pan. And we are just going to simmer those peppercorns in water, again, until it's reduced by half. I think everybody's kind of got that. Hope you all are enjoying. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is a little bit of ladle work. That's a 2-ouncer, okay? So I got a ladle here, and I kind of want to talk about how to use a ladle, okay? I'm going to basically go in there and scoop the milk solids off of the surface of that butter to leave me clarified butter. And then I'm going to scoop out the rest of the butter for my nefarious purposes, okay? So I've got a little container here. What I want to do is I want to grab the ladle. Let me back up a little bit here. I want to grab the ladle in the center, okay? So it's balanced. If you're holding the ladle up here, it's not going to be very balanced. I've talked about this in other shows. So grab it in the middle. Feel the balance point, okay? And then you're going to go straight down into the butter, and you're just going to let the butt of the ladle go into the surface there, and you're just going to let the milk solids just slide over the edge of that ladle. And that way you're just pulling out milk solids and not losing butter. I don't want to scoop up butter. I want to leave that behind right now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just place it down in there, and I'm going to let those milk solids just slide over the edge. Do what I have to do to get them. This ladle might be slightly large for this job. Now, let me say, when I was melting this butter, I melted it. I pulled it out of a double boiler. I melted it in a double boiler because I wanted it to melt very gently. If you just put your butter in a pot, you will find that that butter starts simmering and you won't get a clean separation between those elements that I had. I learned this little trick working in hotels. They had big pots of butter that would just sit there and melt, and it would just separate perfectly. So right now, I'm kind of spinning my cylinder, and I'm letting those milk solids just kind of edge over the side of that ladle. And I'm just trying to get them all. I've got most of them out of there already. And so I'll just kind of set that aside. And then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and start ladling out the clean butter fat that's in there, okay? I don't want to stir this or anything. I want to be very, very gentle. So the next thing I'm going to do is I've got another one of those cylinders, and I'm just going to start pulling out the clean butter fat and placing it in this other cylinder to use later. By the way, my little reduction has probably gone down almost by half, so I'm just going to turn that off and let it steep for a minute. I've got about 1 ounce of liquid in there. Next, I'm going back to my clarified butter, and I'm going to start pulling it out. And I'm just letting that butter fat ease over the edge. I'm still going straight down in there. And eventually I'm going to start seeing whey down there. It's a white liquid. It looks like, I mentioned earlier, it looks like skim milk. And when I start seeing the whey, I'm going to stop, and then I'm just going to have perfectly clean butter over here. And I just keep right on rolling. In a lot of breakfast cookery, they will kind of cut their butter with a little bit of oil or something, just to save a little money. But if you're making a hollandaise sauce, you don't really want to do that. It's kind of funky, okay? So you guys get the idea. I've got some clarified butter there. I may incorporate the rest of this in there. You guys kind of get the idea. I just kind of wanted to show you that, okay? Now, very important with this butter, very important, we need to keep it fairly warm. So it's going to go back in a double boiler over here, and I'm just going to leave a ladle there. When I say double boiler, what I mean is there's a pot with a little bit of water in there, and I'm just going to turn a very small flame on under that, and I'm going to get that butter a little bit warmer. Now that I've got the clarified butter, I kind of want to talk about butter a little bit, okay? I want to review here. As I melted the butter, I went super low and slow so the butter just separated out perfectly, okay? I kind of ladle it out very carefully. I got rid of the milk solids first, and then I ladle out the clean butter, and then I've just got the whey left in the bottom of that. The whey I don't want, it's all water basically, okay? As you're working with this, I'm warming my butter, but I don't want the butter to be too hot. We're gonna be working this butter into some eggs in a little while, and if it's too hot, my eggs are gonna scramble, right? It kind of makes sense. So if this butter is boiling hot, it's gonna mess me up. I also don't want the butter to be too cold. What happens when butter gets cold? It solidifies, right? It solidifies about at body temperature, right? So, you know, you get to about 98 degrees or something, and your sauce, your hollandaise sauce that you're trying to make here is gonna seize up like butter, and once a hollandaise sauce seizes up hard like that, you can't bring it back to life. You can't melt that or anything like that, okay? So let's see, I've got my clarified butter. We talked about not too hot, it'll scramble your eggs. We talked about not too cold, it will just solidify and you will not have sauce. Sauce by definition is not solid, okay? So next element I want to talk about are the yolks. Let's go ahead and kind of bust out some yolks here, okay? I need to separate a few. When I'm doing a hollandaise or any other emulsion sauce, I think about, you know, how much I need and how much I'm going to get out of one yolk, basically. When I'm doing a one yolk hollandaise, I'm getting about a cup to a cup and a half of sauce. One yolk hollandaises are very tough to do, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a two yolk hollandaise. It's a little simpler to do that. So that's what you'll see today. And so anyway, as we're doing that, for every yolk that I have, I need about a ½ ounce of reduction. Remember I said we started with 2 ounces of reduction, we reduced it down to 1 ounce. That means I have 1/2 ounce for each yolk that I'm going to be using for this 2 yolk hollandaise. I hope that's making sense so far, right? Also, for each yolk that I throw in there, I want to get about 8 to 10 ounces of butter in there, okay? You could probably get away with 6 to 8 maybe, but the thing is I don't want too little butter in there because it's just going to taste like nothing but egg yolks and butter on my, basically like egg yolks on my palate, right? So I want to get the right amount of butter in there. Otherwise it's just too eggy, right? Ugh, I don't want an egg sauce. I want a butter lemon sauce, right? And so too little and it's going to taste eggy. Too much butter going into the eggs and you're probably going to separate the sauce. The eggs can only kind of hold so much, right? And so again, kind of going back to the eggs, a couple of ratios here. You want a ½ ounce of that liquid reduction, that flavorful reduction I made in the little pot. It's right here in that cute little pot, okay? And you're going to want about 6 to 8 ounces of butter in that baby for every yolk that you put in there, okay? I want to caution you again, as I put this together, you'll see me kind of working with it. Anything that's too hot, if I get my eggs too hot, I'm going to scramble them. If they get too cold, again, my butter is going to seize up. This is all about temperature, right? It's kind of tricky. I'm going to kind of get a pot of fire going here, a pot of water going, and get a fire going under it, and make sure I got some hot water when we get there, because we're getting ready to make a hollandaise here, okay? So let me go ahead and separate a couple of egg yolks. I tend not to do too much prep ahead of time because I want to show you guys that you can just do all your cooking right in front of everybody, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw my yolks directly into the bowl that I'm going to be using. And we're just going to crack these guys one at a time. I just turned off a little fire under my butter. And I'm going to pull out the egg whites. Now, very important, when we're doing a hollandaise, we don't want any egg white in there. Egg white scrambles at a really low temperature. Egg yolks, they can take the heat a little bit more, but they can still scramble. Any little egg white in there that I leave in this bowl that I put in the stainless bowl over here, this one right here, this guy, okay? Any egg white that goes in there is going to be the first thing that starts scrambling when I'm making, when I'm applying heat to this, okay? So I got 1 egg, I got 2 eggs coming up. Really just going for the yolks here. All right, I think I got 99.99% of the egg white out of there. I've got some yolks. I've got my little reduction there with my water and peppercorn. I've got a pot on the fire. Okay, now one of the things I need to do is start adding ingredients to this. I'm going to be adding a little bit of salt to this. I'm going to add a little cayenne pepper. Again, I'm doing a really, really simple one, but just a variation on that cayenne. I've seen chefs use Tabasco in this instead of any kind of pepper, right? I've also, you know, I've got a little homemade jalapeno sauce here, a fermented jalapeno sauce. If I need a little more heat later, I might throw a little of that in there just to kind of be fun, right? Another thing I might throw in with these yolks, I'm not going to do it today, but mustard. Mustard helps emulsions, and so just a tiny little dollop of mustard in there also kind of rounds out the flavors kind of nicely as well. A lot of the breakfast chefs that I know will put a little Dijon mustard in their eggs, okay? This particular Dijon is pretty strong. All right. To be honest, right now I'm kind of stalling because I wanted this peppercorn reduction to kind of cool off a little bit. I want it to cool enough for it to go in with my egg yolks that I have underneath. I don't want to scramble them. So I'm going to set my yolks aside, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to strain this into another container, and that is going to help me cool it off. It's fairly cool already. So let me just get that. I'm just going to go into another stainless steel bowl, okay? When I strain the reduction into here, it's going to suck all the heat out of there. So there's my reduction. I got about 1 ounce of liquid, okay? I didn't measure this, and if I need more liquid, I'll add it, and you'll probably see me do just that. I tend to do that for my demo. I don't know what this is doing here, okay? I'm going to go hang this up. All right. Okay, so that reduction is cooled off enough to be able to mix in with my eggs. And once I mix it in with my eggs, I'm going to add my cayenne pepper in there, and I'm also going to add a little bit of salt. I want to caution you, we're not throwing the salt on those raw egg yolks. It'll start coagulating, and it almost scrambles them, okay? They react badly to that, so leave the salt out until I can dilute those egg yolks, okay? Again, we're doing a 2-yolk Hollandaise here, and I am using a balloon whisk here, or a very soft wire whisk. Don't use a heavy whisk. Those are made for making muffin batters and things like that, right? So I just whisked up the egg yolks in there, and I'm going to go ahead and pour in my reduction. I got a good amount of liquid in there, and what I'm doing is I am diluting those proteins so they're a little bit less likely to scramble, okay? They can take a little more heat now. I'm going to set this bowl aside. We're going to be using that later. And now all I have in there is my flavored reduction of peppercorn and water, and I've got my yolks in there. At this point, since I've kind of stirred things together, I can add a little bit of salt in there, and I'm adding a goodly amount because I'm making about 1.5 cups of sauce. So I'm adding enough salt in there for 1.5 cups of sauce. That was a good teaspoon at least, okay? I'm going to add about 1/4 teaspoon, a little pinch, a skosh, a bump of some cayenne pepper, okay? And that's going on in there. And that cayenne, it blends in much nicer. You don't want black pepper in here. It just doesn't show up nicely. I think you might have noticed I strained out all of those black peppercorns. I didn't leave them in there. And this is a very simple start to a hollandaise, okay? So the only other thing I need is my clarified butter. Now I heated that up, and it's kind of making me nervous. Let me set it somewhere that'll be a little more appropriate. I've got a pot of hot water here. And the first thing I want to do is basically just, I've got my water to a boil basically. It was boiling furiously, and then I shut it off. I don't need to do my hollandaise on a fire, on a flame. I don't need it to be on a stove. Once I get that water hot, I'm just going to throw my eggs on top and start working from there. I think I have enough energy in the pot to make a hollandaise here. Okay, so I have, get you a little closer. I have some eggs in a bowl here, and what I'm going to do is just whisk them up a little bit, and they're going to get a little bit frothy here, okay? And I want to keep whisking them until I get to the ribbon stage. Let me adjust that camera a little bit, and you'll see what the ribbon stage is, but I shall describe it, okay? The ribbon stage, you're going to be able to kind of pull this whisk up and have a ribbon of egg hanging off of the bottom of it. Now, because I'm applying heat, you're seeing it getting frothy really quickly. It's also kind of loose for egg yolks, right? And it's because I have all that water in there. Getting frothier. I want to be able to kind of create a pattern as I drag my whisk through there. I'm going to change my grip. And I tend to get a good amount of froth when I'm bending that whisk. Now it's starting to get warmer. I'm going to touch it. Yeah, the liquid's getting a little warmer, and we'll be getting a little closer to that ribbon stage here. I don't have any fire on under this pot. I just have hot water under there. Maybe you can see the steam. So this is kind of fun. Whisking it up. Earlier I was talking about how Hollandaise is frothy and fluffy. It's not like mayonnaise. So I'm starting to get the ribbon where I can kind of get a little pattern in there. I do have quite a lot of liquid in there too, so it doesn't hit that ribbon quite as readily. If you have less reduction, you'll hit that ribbon right away. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start adding fat, okay? I'm adding my clarified butter. If you saw my mayonnaise video before, you'll know that I start out with tiny, tiny amounts of fat, okay? So that's what you're going to see now. So there's about a teaspoon of butter there, and I'm going to whisk it in. I'm going to whisk it thoroughly till it's all in, but then I'm going to add the next one. All I need to do is make sure that the butter's incorporated, and then I can add the next amount of butter. So here I go with the next one. Just a little bit in the beginning. I talked about this quite a lot in the last mayonnaise class as well. Now, as I go, I'm conscious that I could scramble eggs, so every once in a while, you'll hear me say spin and sweep, and that means I'm just going to go around cleaning off the edges of the bowl so I don't scramble eggs around the edges. I'm going to go in with my next butter. I'm going to start going a little faster. There's just about a half of a teaspoon at a time. In these early stages, you cannot add too much fat. As this begins to stabilize, you'll be able to add larger amounts. So there's just about a half teaspoon at a time. A sixth of a tablespoon, or a sixth of an ounce. Excuse me, I need to get a little sip here. We've been talking the whole time. Okay, we'll do another spin and sweep because I had to stop there for a second. And I'm going to work in the next amount of butter. Every once in a while you kind of feel the bottom, make sure it's still hot. Make sure it's not too hot. If you're seeing scrambled eggs, maybe ease off of the heat a little bit. And this time I put in about a half a teaspoon instead of a quarter teaspoon. And I'm going to throw in another half a teaspoon. And I'm just going to whisk it in. Make sure that you get it all in there before you add the next teaspoon. You see what I did there? I'm not whisking for 20 minutes in between butter applications. I'm going to throw another one in. And that was about a teaspoon that time. As this comes together, I'm adding a little bit more at a time. You can see the foam in there. It's still frothy. That's what I'm looking for. I put about a teaspoon in again. Giving it a spin and a sweep. It's beginning to get a little thicker, and that's something you will recognize when your emulsion starts coalescing, if you will, okay? It's counterintuitive. You're adding a liquid. It looks like you're adding liquid, but you're really adding a lipid. And that is going to get this thing to get thicker and thicker, as you will see. And here we go. I'm not whisking for 10 minutes in between butter applications. Just long enough to incorporate, and I move on. There's no lemon in here yet. Lemon's going in later. I put about 2 teaspoons in there that time. Not quite a tablespoon. Again, there's no fire on underneath this. I'm just using the thermal energy in the pot of boiled water. If you want a recipe for that boiled water, check out my website. And I'm going to do a spin and sweep. You can see it's getting a little more sauce-like. It's frothy, it's foamy, it's not hot mayonnaise. It's not thick and unctuous like that. Still adding more butter. I want this to get pretty thick. I gotta add a little lemon juice to it too. And also, I don't want too little butter in there, because then it's just gonna be all eggy. Nobody wants that. So you may see me thin this a little bit with some lemon juice or something. You may see me thin this and then add more butter to it, just so I get a decent ratio of butter to egg in there. I want this to taste decent. Spin and sweep, making sure nothing is scrambling, nothing at all. It's beautiful, okay? This is easy. It's just like making mayonnaise. I think one of the things that makes most people nervous when they're doing this, boy, I put in about two teaspoons that time. One of the things that makes people nervous is having a flame under the pot. If you've ever had trouble with hollandaise, just get the pot of water boiling and then just do it on top there and turn off the fire. It's just going to make you nervous. All right, still going with my clarified butter. You can see it looks like hollandaise. I need to go a lot further though, and I still haven't added any lemon. I would like to taste this though, just to kind of check out my salt, because if I'm going to be adding salt to this, I'd like to start now. So let me get a little taste. I'm thinking plenty of salt here, and I'm going to start working a little lemon. Excuse me. I'm going to start working in a little lemon just because it is starting to get fairly thick, okay? That's kind of what hollandaise looks like, okay? But I need to get some acid in here, and that's going to thin it out. Plus, it's pretty eggy still. It's kind of coating my tongue. So I'm going to get a little lemon here, give it a little squish or a smash. I'm going to give it a little cut or a slice. So my old lemon juice trick, I stick a fork into a lemon and go back and forth while I squeeze. The old lemon juice trick. That's what you'll see in those fancy French dining rooms when they're doing the tableside cooking. So there's a good amount of lemon. Let me throw that in there. And we may even add a little more. But I got to get back to this hollandaise here, or it's going to start scrambling. Boom, I think that's good. So that thinned it out a little bit. And notice that it's not getting super thick. It's still foamy. There's still bubbles in there. If this starts to look like mayonnaise, thin it out. You've already driven all of the air out that you kind of worked in the beginning. Don't let it get to that mayonnaise stage. In fact, I would like to thin this even more. Should I use water or should I use lemon? The answer in that is really, let's taste it, right? And let the ingredients tell us what to add. So if I taste this and I've got plenty of lemon, I'm going to add water to thin it. I'm going to add a little bit of lemon. I think I'll just go with it like this. I'm going to hold it straight up. We won't worry about the strainer this time. A little more lemon, I think. All right, back to it. You notice I tasted that before I thinned it, right? If it was too acidic, I would have used water to thin that or something other than the lemon. Okay, I'm gonna go with more butter. I did about a good tablespoon, right? 3 teaspoons. That's all gonna kind of drop to the bottom. I just kind of work one edge and slowly work that in. All of that is in the bottom. That butter's still there. My rotations get a little bit bigger here. And now I've kind of incorporated all of that butter and I'm ready to add the next one. Again, I'm not whipping this thing for 10 minutes in between butter additions. I just threw another tablespoon in there. Now that this now that this sauce is coalesced, it's pretty forgiving and I can add big amounts of that fat to it. Did you just see that? I just threw in about 1.5 ounces of butter into that thing. Let's do that again. 1.5 ounces of butter. Let me tilt that guy. I'm just going to drop it in there it sinks straight to the bottom. I was talking about this in the mayonnaise class. And I can just kind of whisk on the other side. It's going to get pretty thick this time. I may have to thin it with a little water after this. And all of it is incorporated. That's the important thing, is that you incorporate it fully every single time you add the butter to it, okay? I think it's got plenty of thickness to it. If anything, I might thin it just a bit here. I'm going to feel the bottom of it because, again, temperature is very important, okay? One thing that I just noticed when I picked this up, it's much lighter than it looks like, okay? It's like clouds of sauce, and that's what I want, okay? Hollandaise should be light and fluffy. When I look at this, I'm seeing millions of tiny bubbles in there that are popping, okay? Finally, last few things here. We are going to taste again, okay? I want to check my salt. I want to check a little bit of spiciness on this. I want a tiny bit of spice just to open up my palate a little bit more. It will help me taste that butter. It'll help me taste that lemon a little bit more, right? So I'm checking out the spiciness, the salt of this, and I also want to look at acid and fat balance. This is straight butter and lemon juice here, and you want, when you taste it, you want it to be like a teeter-totter. You want them to be in balance. If it's all lemon over on one side, back off on that, maybe add a little more fat, and it'll bring it into balance, right? So if there's too much lemon juice, I'll add more butter, okay? If I taste it and there's too much fat and there's not enough acid, I can add more acid to it. If I taste it and I can't taste, if I taste it and I don't taste lemon, I'll add more lemon. If I taste it and I don't taste butter, I typically need more salt. More butter is not going to help you, especially more clarified butter. But if you're not tasting butter, add more salt to it, and that'll bring that butter flavor out. I've had a million students come back and tell me, wow, chef, you were right about that. It really does work, okay? So let me get another taste here. Look at the sauce. And it's pretty lemony. I'm liking that. I want to add a little heat to it. So I'm going to bring in a little of my hot sauce. You guys can use Tabasco or anything like that, sriracha. But this is just I did a fermented vegetable class in here. And let me make it a little spicy. And I just fermented some chilies and then pureed them up, and I've been using that hot sauce and all kinds of stuff. So that's going away. Fermented right here at home. Let's see, I added a little bit of the spice to it. My salt is fine. I don't need to add any salt to this. I can taste the butter, no problem. So I'm mixing it all together. I've got a nice consistency here for my hollandaise. It's beautiful, okay? So the next thing I need to do is start talking about poaching, okay? I'm gonna move this hollandaise over, and I gotta start heating up a pot. And we're gonna bring this hollandaise home. Okay. Now, one of the things, we're not done with hollandaise here, okay? I'm just heating up a pot. We're not done with this hollandaise because now we got to figure out how to hold this stuff. If I put it right on a double boiler, this stuff will separate. The eggs will scramble. The fat's going to start working out of it, right? If I let it get too cold, the butter's going to solidify. So I got to keep it in this range where it's not going to seize up like cold. So it's hotter than body temperature and 100 degrees or so, but it's not so hot to where it starts scrambling eggs. What I tend to do is I will leave it on a little double boiler or something like that. If I have that, I'm going to get it hot again, basically, a little bit. And then I'm going to put more bowls in between this. I might even, I think what I will do is I'm going to get a towel. I'm going to put a wet towel in between those bowls. So here's the first bowl. Wet towel for insulation, okay? That's an insurance policy. That's going to go on a hot pot of water. And then I'm going to put my hollandaise on top of that. And that towel will heat up in there. And hopefully, I'm going to guess that isn't going to destroy my hollandaise. It's just going to chill on the back there. All right. You're also going to want to really keep an eye on that if you're doing other projects, okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about poaching, okay? Gosh. One more thing I should talk about. Let's go back to hollandaise, okay? Now, oftentimes when we're doing these hollandaise sauces, it can separate it. You'll hear the term, it'll break, right? So what that means is you've got the egg portion and you've got the, let me get rid of this. you got the egg portion over here and the bottom basically, and then a bunch of butter is floating up on top of it. It looks separated basically. What you're gonna do is basically keep that sauce, and you're gonna get a brand new bowl. You're gonna put a fresh yolk into it, and then you're just gonna whisk in like a teaspoon of the broken sauce into that fresh yolk, okay? It's just like you're starting all over again, but you're whisking broken sauce into a fresh yolk. And if you're following the steps, 9 times out of 10, the reason it broke is you were adding fat too fast, okay? So just take your time, keep it at a good temperature, and play with this stuff. Don't be intimidated by it. It's fun to kind of get into and be able to execute this stuff. I'm still kind of feeling my sauce here, feeling the temperature. It's still a good temp. It's not getting too hot, not getting too cold. My towel's starting to warm up in there, and all is right with the world, okay? We're gonna start talking about poaching. I'm just doing a little bit of a scene change here. Things are heating up. Yeah, getting too close to the stove. So just let me wipe up a second, and we're gonna get into the next phase here. I think another thing we can do is we're going to be doing a Bennie here, and I've got some English muffins, so let me just go ahead and cook those guys too while we're waiting for this to come up. I got to get everything ready, right? I mentioned for the Bennie I'm going to be using bacon today, and my bacon's already cooked. One of the things that I might do for my Bennie bacon is I don't cook it until it's crispy. It's more at that leathery, chewy stage so I can get a knife and fork through it, okay? And so just a suggestion, you may like that crispy bacon, but if I'm eating bacon in a dish, I like it to be more of that leathery, chewy kind of consistency. And then if I'm just eating straight bacon, then I want it crispy like a potato chip, okay? So I've got my bacon there. I'm not cooking it to order, just so you know, adults should probably know in this world that there is no Santa Claus first, and then also we don't cook bacon to order in restaurants, okay? It's all cooked ahead of time, and it's just hanging out ready for us when we're ready to go, okay? Let's see. I have turned a little fire on underneath the saute pan that I used to cook that bacon over there, okay? And then I'm gonna slap down some English muffins here to cook them in that bacon fat. I have this flavorful fat, why not use it? Now, all the kids are making their own English muffins, you know, these days. I just went out and got some English muffins for the class today, for the show. And I got Thomas's, okay? You're seeing these all the time out in the industry. When I bust these out before a ship, I will go through and slice all of these guys and put them right back in the package. So my package, I will just have it on the line, and I can usually just cut the end open and reach in, and I grab my English muffins, and they're already sliced like that. And then at the end of the shift, when I'm done, I can just kind of wrap them back up again, okay? So I always kind of leave them in the packaging. Most of the guys I know kind of do that too, because they stack well like that, and they stay reasonably fresh. I've got a little heat under this saute pan here, and like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and toast these English muffins off in a little bit of bacon fat. Why not? It's beautiful. I think I'll put a little heavy plate on there to give it a little weight. There we go. I like to press them. I don't know if you guys saw that, but we're going to start talking about poaching next, okay? I'm feeling pretty good about things. Now, I've got some simmering water right there. That's a pretty decent simmer. I'll get rid of this lid. But poaching is a little bit different than simmering, right? It's when we're talking about poaching, when we're talking about simmering, when we're talking about boiling, excuse me, hiccup. When we're talking about those three things, we're talking about 3 different temperature ranges. Poaching is the lower range of the 3. Simmer is in the middle, and then boiling, of course, is boiling, right? Water doesn't get any hotter than that, right? And so right now I am at a full boil. That's 212 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? It is a rapid surface agitation is what you're seeing there. When we're talking about a simmer, we are usually looking at about 210 degrees or so, just under that boil, and it's usually just a little bloop, 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 just minor surface activity, not much going on. All right. I just flipped over my English muffins, and I'm turning them off. They're done. They're toasty. Whoops. They look beautiful. All right. I put a little weight on top of them. Okay, so I mentioned simmering. It usually runs about 210 or something, just under the boil, right? And then when we get to poaching, that's something that's going about, poaching starts low end about 170, and you can go up to about 180, 190 maybe, but 190 it's getting a little intense, right? So poaching's kind of a low end temperature, and it's used for delicate proteins, is what they say. I think a better way to say it is it's used for proteins that are easy to overcook, okay? You can really dry out shrimp, right? So you don't want to sit there boiling shrimp while you're talking on and on. You want to poach it, right? Really, really low and slow. You don't want to do. You don't want to boil salmon, right? You don't want to boil steaks. You don't want to poach steaks too often either, but and you don't want to boil eggs, right? Unless they're still in a shell. Normally we want to poach eggs because it's so easy to overcook them. If you've ever had an overcooked egg, it's very, very rubbery. The white itself is very dry. The yolk actually looks white when you overcook an egg, right? And so when we're talking about poaching, we want really, really low temperatures. One of the things that will help us cook proteins at a low temperature is acid. If we add a little acid in the mix, acids kind of also will scramble protein, for lack of a better word. We usually say denature or coagulate, right? But we're really talking about scrambling eggs. It tightens up those proteins, right? And acids, going back to acids will tighten up proteins too. Think of lime juice on fresh fish making ceviche, right? It gets firmer, right? And so if the acid will work the same way in this poaching liquid here. If I add a little bit of vinegar to the pot, that acid will help to kind of form those proteins a little quicker and tighter and faster without having such a high heat. And so that's usually kind of the way we do it and what we talk about in culinary school. I gotta say, there's also another little trick in culinary school to make a perfect little poached egg. What you'll do is like stir the pot and make a vortex, right? And then you drop your eggs into it and you can get this perfect little egg. But the only problem is, who serves a single egg, right? Eggs are served in twos. So if you do a vortex for one, what do you do with the other one? Is it just gonna turn into egg drop soup? What's going on, right? And so working on the line and doing breakfast year after year, okay, it's like I just tend to have my liquid at a little bit higher temp. I usually start at more of a simmer. It's a little higher than a poach, and then I let those cold eggs hit it, and that hotter temperature just kind of gels the outside, for lack of a better word, right? And then I turn it down at that point. With most of my egg cookery, I did an egg class a few weeks back, Eggs of Glory. I'm sure you saw it, right? And the watchword was, hey, start them high, but then turn them way down, okay? And I'm gonna do the same thing with this poach. It goes back to that class. So let me get a couple of eggs here, and we're gonna... All right, so I got a few eggs out. I'm just gonna, do a couple of them here. But before I do the eggs, I'm going to go ahead and add some vinegar. I'm just using rice vinegar. You want to use like a white neutral vinegar for this. You don't want to make it too strong, but you do want to refresh it from time to time because acids evaporate, okay, out of your liquid. And so if I add this acid now, I'm doing a little Benedict bar or something for home entertaining or something like that. After about 40 minutes, or maybe even 20, there's no more acid in my pot anymore, no more vinegar, it just cooks away. So I'm gonna add a little bit more from time to time, okay? So I'm gonna throw in about a ½ ounce or so because I'm just going right in with this. Normally, if I'm getting ready to cook on the line, I'm throwing in like an ounce of vinegar and I'm replacing it like every ½ hour, maybe every 40 minutes or so. Okay, so now that I've done that, I kind of lost some of my heat and I wanna get that heat back up. Before I really kind of get going on this, let me grab a little something here, a little setup that I didn't grab before. I got a little plate here, and I put a little towel on it. I need a little beautiful poaching spoon, okay? This is my fave for poaching. It's just a little short perforated spoon. And let me just kind of check my Hollandaise here. It's getting a little warm, So I just folded that towel again. Ooh, getting a little warm there. Whoa. You know what? It got a little too hot. It's starting to break around the edges. This is a teachable moment here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny bit of water to this. I need a little bit of warm water. I don't want it super, super hot. And I think I've got a little bit of warm water underneath there. I'm just going to hit that in there, a little bit of water, and I'm going to bring this guy back together. I'm stirring in the corner, sorry guys, stirring in the corner where I added the water, and it's coming back together. It just got a little hot. When you're working in a restaurant, you'll find that one spot where you can hold hollandaise all day. Oh boy, this is getting a little sketchy. Just a little too warm. Oh man, that's never happened before. That's awesome. Let's set that aside for now. Bummer. You saw it, it was thick and unctuous. I'm gonna get back to this poaching and bring this show to the end here. I'll try and thicken this a little bit more near the end. I'm going to work a little more fat in there, but let me poach these eggs, guys. So I'm at a simmer here, okay? It's really not a rapid boil, but it's not a poach either. Like I was saying, I tend to go a little higher heat than you know, they talk about in culinary school, okay? So I'm going to drop in one. That high heat is going to help that all come together very quickly. And by the way, dropping these eggs in here, it's like I'm dropping ice cubes in that liquid, okay? I just lost that boil, so I'm actually going to let that boil recover here before I mess with anything. And once that boil begins to recover, then I'm going to turn my heat down. The trick here is you're starting high and then turning it down. I want to recover that heat. So they're coming together nicely. And there goes the temperature. I'm turning that temp down. And I'm really just looking for bubbles on the bottom of the pot. There they go. That's a nice poach temperature right there. Just a little bit of agitation in the corner. I'm liking it. I don't want to mess with these eggs too much. While that's going, I'm going to take another look at this hollandaise. I'm going to whip. I think I've fixed that emulsion. It's not coming apart anymore. Oh, maybe it is. Hey, I'm just going to do a quick save here. Little adjust on my poaching pot. My poaching is doing fine over there. And the little teardrop shape is becoming evident. Nothing sticking to the bottom. Give you another little shot over there. There they are. They're beautiful. All right. So I threw a yolk in here. Again, this sauce broke because it got too hot. So I'm going to take a little broken sauce and I'm going to work it into that yolk. Just the yolk. All the flavor is in there already. Everything's great. It's just going to be a little eggier than the other. Tiny bits. This one broke because it got too hot. Whoa! I'm going to check a poach real quick. Right there. And I'm just going to lift one and just touch it with my finger. I'm looking for a nice soft center yolk. Oh my gosh, that one's perfect. So I'm pulling it out and I'm just going to lay it on this piece of paper towel. And I'm going to pull the other guy because he's probably done too. And then we're going to fix this hollandaise real quick. And that's it, okay? Beautiful poached eggs, by the way. Look at them shake. Oh, look at them jiggle. Oh, too much glare. There you go. Beautiful. So yeah, let me get this sauce fixed. I'm using the bowl here to get a little heat going. It's down in there, not the right size bowl for this. Oh, just terrible. But we're going to bring this guy back together. Every once in a while, I'm just dipping it in there, getting the bowl a little hot. Not too hot. By the way, when I was making this earlier, one thing I didn't mention is you don't want your bowl touching that water. You want it over the water. Okay, just over an hour here, and you can see my sauce is coming back together. And now that it's kind of stabilized, I can add more of that in there. And this guy's coming right back together. Look at that. That's a stable sauce. That is a functioning emulsion right there. A little bit at a time. Work it in, work it in, work it. I'm going to get a little heat. Not too much, because that's how I broke it earlier. And again, it was just while I was talking about poaching. Just got a little hot. It's all coming back together. Look at that. I got a functioning Hollandaise now. I think I can get rid of this ladle. And I'll just keep working this bowl in here. How easy is that to fix your Hollandaise, right? I'm kind of glad that happened. I'm using all of the sauce that I made. And it's right back to normal. It just has an extra egg yolk in it. You can tell your customers it's an extra rich Hollandaise. And I actually have all my foam back. It's looking beautiful. It doesn't look like hot mayonnaise. Hot Mayonnaise, that was a name of my indie band back in college. Just kidding. I didn't go to college. All right. So there is a fixed Hollandaise. I'm going to give it another taste. I'm pretty sure that seasoning ought to be pretty okay. And then we are going to put together a little Bennie. Last taste. Yeah, I think I'm going to add 1 grain of salt. Grain. Ooh, I have a nice little spicy afterburn to it. I want to just kind of get this a little warmer. It's just not quite hot enough. So I'm just kind of on a water bath here. Let me show you. I'm just touching the water bath and just getting a little heat in there, but notice I keep it moving as I'm doing it. And there is my Hollandaise sauce. It's still light and fluffy. How cool is that? I got my air back in it. All right. Let's plate a Bennie. I'm going to grab a few little toasty English muffins with bacon fat. There they are. I guess you're seeing that. I'm going to top them with crispy bacon. Actually, less than crispy bacon. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to load up my eggs. Beautiful. Beautiful egg shape. I didn't need to create a little vortex or anything. And then finally, I've got a decent Hollandaise here. I'll write home about that one. And here's how I know it's a decent consistency, is like you're not seeing the egg through it. If you want it thicker, add a little more butter to it, but eventually you're really not, you're going to get hot mayonnaise, right? It's just going to get too thick, okay? I think I'll throw a little bit of green onion on top, and we're going to sum up. I'm not doing the traditional truffle on there. My wife can't stand truffles. But hey, some beautiful shaved green onion. It's a beautiful plate. It's not too shabby, and it looks like something, heck, you might get at a restaurant or something like that, okay? We talked about Hollandaise. We talked about the 3 different main ingredients of Hollandaise, the butter, what we're looking for. And again, I want to tell you that whole butter will work for you. I just kind of ease up on my reduction, okay? So butter, you've got eggs, perfect poached eggs. Again, kind of get them, start them high, and then kind of turn them down once they're in there and let them cook the rest of the way. And then we talked about, you know, the reduction in your Hollandaise and all of that stuff. We really covered a lot of dynamics here, emulsions and aeration as we made that Hollandaise. We talked about acid and fat balance. We talked about spice balance in this, right? Or seasoning balance, I should say, that salt and the pepper idea, that pepper opening up the palate so you can taste much more of what's going on in your food. If you enjoyed this, please join me every Monday. I'm laying down more culinary technique. I think I may do another butter class next week. I'm kind of into this breakfast stuff, and I may just do some more butter sauces like beurre blancs and things like that. It's in the pipeline. I'm not 100% on what I'm doing, but you can join me every week at the industry cooking community. We're doing these live, and then I upload them onto the YouTube if you want to check them out anytime. There's tons and tons of cooking discussion over there, right? I don't know if I want to call it a class or a show or what, but you know what? There's a lot of good information in these things, so it's worth a try checking it out. Okay, get over to Industry Cooking channel on YouTube and subscribe and see what they got, right? So that's about all I have for now. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're learning a little something out of these things, and I just want everyone to kind of learn more about food, learn how to be true to the food. Don't forget, people, the party's always in the kitchen, right? And we need to be there. We need to get back in the kitchen and make it a bigger part of our lives. Okay, guys? Let's check out that Bennie again, huh? Look at that. Ooh, the missus, she's gonna be happy with that. You better believe. Look at that. Nice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it.